fight, but we're going to have to fight more. It is requiring courage, but more courage than we've had before. It is going to require us to be united, but more united than we have before. And we're going to have to take this on in a sacrificial and intense way because we are facing the erosion and the destruction of democracy in ways that we have never come to know. So let us all join together and be prepared to wage a very strong and vicious fight unlike any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes.
Thank you for the response. Very, very eloquent response. Maybe keep a little bit more precise with the question just because I want to make sure everyone is able to speak. So responsive thing be kept under 3 minutes, just so a conversation can be sort of kept.
We're getting party discipline already.
Yes.
Just give everybody 30-second warning and pull the plug.
But Arielle or Sarah, if you would like to comment on the sort of growth and how it.
So, as part of a new chapter, I think we're a new chapter that has roots, and we've looked back to our chapter as it was in the 80s. We were lucky enough to have a few members from that period of growth in the ranks. Sorry, I'm all scrambled. The thing that I think is really that's bridging the old guard as it is, because I haven't felt a ton of tension between the old guard and the new guard, as it were, in our chapter, is the sense that I know that I belong here. I've never felt for a moment within the DSA that I don't. The fact that I'm welcomed at this table, which is beyond humbling and amazing, speaks to the commitment that DSA has to lift as we climb. We are moving forward. We are teaching one another. We're developing each other. We have cadres forming. We have invested in each other, whether it's mentors in small chapters or mentors across the country. It's a real, genuine community, comradeship, solidarity. It's an action. It's not an abstract concept. It's not just in a book. I know that if I call Hannah or if I reach out to Maria, I'll get a response right away. I know that we are in this for the long haul. We're deliberate, we're dedicated, and we're invested in one another. So I don't know that the old guard versus the new guard, or if you're a Marxist versus a Trotskyist, I don't think it really matters. I think what matters is that we knew that whether Bernie won or Hillary would have won, we'd be here. And this fight is needed. There is a big fight, and it's scarier than ever. That orange-haired monster is terrifying, and I didn't think I'd have to be playing this much defense at this time in my life. But we're fighting, and we can win, and we will win, because we all have each other's backs in a real way.
So I think amid all of the amazing growth that DSA has experienced, it's really important for us to keep in mind that we're incredibly lucky to have an organization that has a legacy, and so that we're not reinventing the wheel. This is not a time that I would personally like to be reinventing the wheel. So I think taking advantage of that legacy can take a lot of different forms. I mean, I'm very happy that on this panel we have people who are totally new to DSA, people who are not new to DSA, and I think actually in more of our outreach, public discussions, political education, all those things, there should be probably more mixing of generations. Often I'm called upon to talk to the youngs, and while I enjoy that and would like to keep doing so, I think that we do want to be mindful that we actually don't want to reify that age difference ourselves. Like, we are all in one organization, and we can stand to learn a lot. I think we might also just want to be conscious that as new members flood into DSA, the organization will not and cannot remain the same. It's going to look different. Its priorities are going to change, and people have to be open to that. One of the things that we should be doing right now is being intentional about what those changes are. So, to take gender, DSA has been disproportionately male. Now, I think that means, obviously, we want to bring more women into the organization. So what does that actually mean? Perhaps women, in order to join an organization, might be encouraged by seeing that like all leadership faces aren't male. And I'm not saying that's true of DSA right now. It's obviously not. But that's something we want to like ensure, right? And so being intentional about like whether we have quotas in our leadership, like whether we want to have specific pathways and specific ways of developing new leadership, women, people of color, and so forth. And a lot of these things are taking place. I'm not saying like no one's doing anything about these things. I'm here to tell you about it. Obviously not. But those are the sorts of things that we all want to be super intentional about as an organization grows and changes, because those are the folks who are going to be setting new priorities, and I think our openness to that is what will help this growth sort of succeed or fail.
Thank you. So the next question is for Joe and Bhaskar. As new members come to this leftist organization, and one that has socialist in its name, there's often a level of excitement for learning more about socialist and leftist history, but also a level of intimidation. I was wondering what, specifically just like known theorists such as like Marx and Gramsci, and history such as like October Revolution. So when you think, and because you have a specific background that's a little more academic, is what purpose do these sort of like longer or like sort of larger ideas have in sort of shaping this powerful movement that engages everyone?
I don't have an academic background. I was 3 credits short of finishing my undergraduate until 2 years ago.
You mentioned right a lot.
But yeah, I mean, I think that in many ways, the most important thing if you're on the left isn't actually to read, immediately jump into and read thinkers of the left, but to have a firm understanding of like social history. So, because it's more important to contextualize periods and movements and whatnot than just to be like robotically recite things. And obviously this is a cliche, I don't like to, use it, but it is true that you could, talk to someone who's from certain political traditions and they'll tell you everything about the 1905 revolution, but they can't tell you, what year, the 13th Amendment was pushed through and whatnot. And obviously, obviously both are useful things to know, but I think there's a certain level of understanding about broadly social history that is more useful. Like I think the most important part of my day is like reading the paper. Like at Jacobin, we subscribe to 2 newspapers, the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal because of the trial. I think we read the Times for the same price. But I mean, so I think that's really the most important thing. As far as thinkers, I do think it's important to just read broadly and read people on their own terms. So don't read to kind of criticize or critique. So in other words, pick up a book of Lenin and obviously keep your faculties about it, but just to kind of read and understand the context of what he's writing and decide what to keep and what not to keep. In particular, if I were to recommend like 3 books from the Democratic Socialist tradition, Michael Harrington has a book called Socialism, the 1976 version, not the last version. I would recommend reading. Ralph Miliband has a bunch of great work. His last book was called Socialism for a Skeptical Age. You should actually read Leon Trotsky. He's a great writer, but you should also read, like I said, a lot of social history, people like Eric Hobsbawm and people like that. And you should definitely not read Gramsci to start with, especially, but maybe even in general. Basically, I'm just going to wrap up by saying that, like, a lot of the left approach to these things, like a checklist, like, have you read this, have you read that, have you read that? Like, there's, it's kind of a credentializing thing. I think the most important thing is just to be, like, interested in ideas, willing to debate them, and have, like, a broad, general knowledge. Then you'll, over time, pick up the details. But, that's my approach to these things.
Thank you. And then Joe.
We're socialists, so I think we should think of education as a social process. And I think it's really good to have reading groups that focus on accessible texts, where people who may be more experienced or less experienced can share knowledge because the common thing is the text. And I think that's one of the good things about Jacobin reading groups. I happen to think that there are also great articles in Jacobin. There are also some articles in Dissent that are worth reading. I think if you don't read Dissent or Jacobin, you probably should read both. You do have to know something about American politics. There are a lot of people who can tell you about the various facts of what the left social revolutionary position on the war in 1917 in Russia was, and they can't explain to you that politics in the United States is crucially decided, not at the federal level, but mostly at the state and local, and that we have 50 political systems, 50 states. And they can't describe the American electoral system. They can't understand the difference between open primaries controlled by the state rather than party primaries that are controlled by the party. In America, anybody can register as a Democrat. My mother was an open communist and a Democratic elected board leader in the Bronx in the 1940s. That's sort of the unique nature of the American political system. There are certain things you can read. I mean, Seymour Lipset and Gary Martz's book, Why It Didn't Happen Here, about American exceptionalism, is worth reading. I think Bhaskar is right, social history. If you've never read Eric Foner on Reconstruction, you should read it. If you want to learn something about the black Marxist and radical tradition, you should read Cedric Robinson. Nancy Fraser can sometimes be tough going, but her more popular essays and her interview with Sarah Leonard, probably the best critique of neoliberal feminism and the best defense of socialist feminism, is probably done by Nancy Fraser. If you've never read her, just Google Fraser New Left Review. Some of it will be a little difficult, but her last essay on sort of neoliberal capitalism and the commodification of caregiving labor, the privatization of caregiving labor, if you want to know what neoliberalism does to children, working people, women, people of color, you should read it. But in many ways, the best thing is to read with other people. Yes. You know, I mean, I've done reading groups where I've taught Marx 50 times, but I've learned a lot about Marx from reading with other people, younger people in DSA. And there's a rich socialist feminist tradition that has to be recovered. There's a rich black radical tradition. You know, if you've never read Du Bois, you should read Black Reconstruction, but you should also read Souls of Black Folk. Right. Certainly some of the introductory essays about double consciousness, dual consciousness. Anyway, but I think you learn by talking to other people. If you're weak on LGBTQ and liberation and the left, talk to people who know that. If you're weak on sort of immigrant rights and sort of the history. Finally, I'm one of the people who believes that the United States is a secular capitalist regime where if you don't understand the role of racism and slavery in American political and economic development, you don't understand the United States. Right. So you certainly have to. Bhaskar's right that a lot of history is fairly accessible. Read good narrative historians who really have an analysis. But for example, if you want to defend affirmative action, read Ira Katznelson When Affirmative Action Was White. Right? It's a very good book about the GI Bill, how it excluded people of GIs of color, included white. It was the greatest affirmative action project for the white working class ever. And that's where white upward mobility, ethnic mobility, that's how Jews and Catholics, the Irish and Italians became middle class. Right. And that's just my suggestion. But reading Jacobin and Dissent would be a good thing to do, and reading it with people who are maybe a little more experienced, because some of the articles are a bit theoretical, that's a good place to start.
Thank you. So beyond just, and I want to go off the sort of where we can look to find solid leftist thought, is on a personal note, I have found a lot of inspiration through like my Christian faith, and I feel like in terms that's often not a common narrative in the leftist community. And I wanted to sort of, and this is open to anybody, is where have they sort of found what you might consider like unexpected? Because I definitely didn't. My parents had never broached Christianity as sort of like a really radicalist, socially progressive. And so I'm curious to know where in your journeys you may have found inspiration in unexpected places outside of the traditional text.
I think there's, within art, the zine-making tradition was definitely something that got me on track. I think there's a lot of people that have those roots. Riot Girl and punk rock music, being part of an intentional DIY art scene really set me on the path. Two authors that weren't mentioned here that were gateways to socialism for me are Leslie Feinberg, who wrote Stonebush Blues, which is a great narrative on blue-collar transgender experience pre-Stonewall. If you haven't heard of it, Google it now and buy it. And also Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde's historical kind of autobiography, Zammy, is a beautiful take on her experience and the Rosenberg trials, and really good at contextualizing both of these works, 20th century socialism and social movements, and very accessible and not theoretical works.
Just to comment real briefly on the religious question, I mean, I think it's very important that we realize that for many people, their ethical and sort of moral commitment to justice does come out of a religious background. Like any institution, religion institutions can be progressive and regressive, but at least for me, growing up sort of early with older sisters and parents who were very involved in the civil rights movement, I mean, King's prophetic Christianity was very important to me and had a real relationship to some of the more radical Jewish traditions, say, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was very close to King. You know, reading Cornel West's early work, I mean, the religious aspects of Cornell's commitment is really quite clear. So I just think that drawing on what most of us have deep in our roots, some sort of emancipatory tradition, whether it be nationally, ethnically, in terms of sort of our gender or our sexuality. And I think, you know, liberation, ultimately I'll conclude, has to be about liberating yourself, not just other people. Right. It's a friend, in 1968, I'll do it in my Bronx French accent, you know, Daniel Cohen said, "C'est pour toi que tu fais la révolution," which means it's for you make the revolution. If you aren't emancipating yourself as well as others, then that's charity, that's not solidarity.
He did well for himself afterwards. He emancipated himself.
And I want to mention today, there's a Reverend Barber. If anybody ever heard of Reverend William Barber, you know, in the Carolinas. He wrote a book called The Third Reconstruction, and he's leading something called Moral Mondays in North Carolina. Now he's on a multi-state tour, and one of the things that he has done is he was the chairman of the NAACP in North Carolina. He resigned because he's trying to continue the Poor People's campaign that was launched by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So he's a person that I look to for inspiration. In addition to that, I really thank Unitarian Universalists because the UUA is a place that has made their congregations sanctuaries for immigrants that are dealing with the threat of deportation. And a lot of Unitarian Universalist congregations, especially in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, have been very much involved in resistance to Orange 45. So I just wanted to mention that.
I think for me, part of the inspiration just came from gender politics. So definitely post-college experiencing sexism in a way that I had not really experienced when I was younger, basically through my industry and work and that sort of thing. And like feeling really shitty about it, and simultaneously realizing that probably like the personalities of like people who work in like publishing was probably not the root of the problem. And oddly, at the same time, I was in fact reading Capital with a group of women. One of the interesting things about Capital, which, by the way, I think is much more accessible to people now because David Harvey has taught a course on Capital for years. And he put all his lectures on the internet. So you can actually read the book and then watch these YouTube videos. And it's really democratized the process of getting to this like fairly difficult text. And so anyway, one of the contentions with Capital is that, of course, Marx defines value as having to do with the wage, without getting into detail here. Women later on, particularly Italians in the 70s, said, our work is not waged, but it has value. Capitalism could not continue without the reproductive work that women do. And so that analysis was extremely compelling to me. What is the feminist analysis that takes place within Marxism, within socialism? And a third thing at the same time was happening, which was that the domestic workers were